This session is going to be a mixture of some talk, some discussion at your tables, and we're going to be doing some live polling. So down here in the bottom, if you want to engage with your smartphone, your text charges apply to you. Don't give me an invoice. You can choose to opt out if you don't want to, but if you text velocity to 22333, that will get you set up for the polling that we will do. And those instructions will come back in a little bit, but it's velocity to 22333. So what we're going to talk about today are what we've seen in terms of a pattern of adopting Agile. Because what I realized early on is that you can't go from 0 to 100 miles an hour overnight. Even though when I first started coaching, I came into an organization and I assessed oh yeah, you guys haven't really been doing Agile. Here's where I think you can get, and I tried to get them there immediately and realized I caused a lot of tension and friction as I tried to get them to 100 miles an hour. And so what I'm going to share with you are ways that you can start and make sure you have the foundational elements, and there's worksheets on the tables. So if you're in the back, you might want to move up to a table, but there's worksheets on the table, pass those around. You're going to be following along as we go. So I don't think there's anything new here, but Austin Agile is my Twitter handle. So easy to remember. It's the inverse of Agile Austin, which is the conference you are at today. All right, okay, good. All right, so we're going to be getting loud somewhere in the middle of this, so I'm going to follow the rule of if you see me raising my hand, then that means wrap up your conversation and raise your hand, and then we'll get everybody visually to see that it's time to wrap it up. So let's practice that. Okay, everybody's arm works. Great. All right, so at this point, almost every organization I talk to is saying, we're doing Agile. Somewhere in the organization, right? Everyone is saying, we've adopted Agile. We're doing Agile. We're an Agile company. Nobody's going around town saying, we're Waterfall. You should come see what we're doing. We've mastered Waterfall, right? Everybody's saying we're trying to get great at Agile. So what I want you to do first poll is I want you to rate the questions up there at the top. The instructions are up there. Again, how good is your organization at Agile? So you're going to give a 0 that's we're not really Agile. And maybe it's you call things Agile, but you're still really doing Waterfall. We call that Scrum or Fall. And then okay or awesome. And all right, I see some results are coming in. So let's start revealing what we're coming up with here. So we'll wait a little bit longer, see what's coming up. Okay, so this is a little bit interesting. So we're switching around a little bit. So we've got 4% awesome. All right. We've got, everybody's trying it at least. But we have more in this kind of mediocre range, right? And that's not uncommon. I mean, at this point, what I'm seeing is that there is more kind of bad or mediocre Agile than there is great Agile, because it's hard. And I see most companies are underestimating what's involved in making this change. They just look at it as, okay, yeah, let's just change the process. Just tell us how to work now. Let's just send everybody to, or let's not even do a day of training. Let's just have everybody, the Agile the most. Let's just do a lunch and learn. You can tell us how to work, and we can just do that. Because the process we're switching from was a prescriptive process, right? It had rules, recipe, follow this recipe. But we're switching from a defined process control to empirical process control that doesn't have a perfect recipe. And that doesn't compute in our leadership's minds. Just do this new process. But what we now know is that it's much more of a cultural and mindset change, and that's hard. So how do we get from where we are, 0 or 20 or 40 mile an hour Agile, to 100 mile an hour Agile? So what I want you to talk about at your tables, or if you're in the back, you either might move up to a table at this time or huddle up, create some huddles in the back. I want you to talk with your group there for just a minute or two. Why do you think there's more bad Agile than good Agile? Ready, go. So let's kind of build on what we're talking about here. So again, follow along with this sheet. You've got this sheet. There's two sides. So one has the satir model, one has this worksheet. So you're going to be following along there. We'll cover those things. So the first issue that we see is that we're not aligned on mission. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we going to Agile? What problems are we trying to fix? What's the outcome we're trying to achieve? What's the business goal? How will we know that we were successful? And so if we think about this, what I want to know is, in your company, is there a clear goal on why you're doing Agile that everyone understands? So A is no, so text that. Or maybe one of these. Yes, we have a clear goal. Our goal is to be Agile. It's been dictated by our CIO. We will be Agile. Or is it that you want faster productivity, predictability? Not what you want, but what has been said from your leadership, the reason why you're implementing Agile. So let's look at what we've got coming on here. So it's like a race. That kind of, you can type clear and then change your answer if you have it. I feel like we're at like the thing where you're throwing the ball and the horses are going across, or you're shooting the thing, or something like that. So more than a quarter, no goal, right? We're just doing it because like everybody else is, or we got 20% who are saying like the goal has been to be Agile. So how is your company going to measure that you're Agile enough? How will you know you're done? Like you won't. There'll just be a point where your CIO or your VP of engineering gets so tired of going Agile that they declare, we're Agile, we're done. Let's go on to something else, right? So we at least have, what's that about, the other 50% who are focused on the some improvement, right? Productivity, faster, predictable, those are usually the most common things that we see. So here's the thing, when we're going to make a change, right, we have something called the satir model of change, and we start off with a status quo, how we've been working in the past, how we've always worked, and then when we make a change, do we get better or worse? We get worse, right? And we enter a phase called chaos and resistance. Now, this is a natural state because we change the rules, right? Everybody knew how to play by the rules here, and all of a sudden we change the rules, and people freak out, right? Because it's like, I knew how to be successful with the rules of the old game. I don't know how to be successful with the new rules. Some of you are probably at this conference because you're trying to figure out what these new rules are that everybody's told you you're going to be Agile, and you're in chaos and resistance right now. So you're kind of freaking out. And so that's natural. What we need to do is support our organization as they're going through this phase, right? And help make sure we're providing the support and hopefully get to a state of integration and practice where we start getting better at it. We start figuring out these new rules. We start practicing these rules, and we can start mastering these new rules. And hopefully then we get a new status quo, which is better than what we were doing before. Right? That's our goal. So if we're going to go through this big change, don't we need to be aligned around a common mission? So we're all saying, yes, this is worthwhile. Going through all this pain is worth it. Right? So we need to make sure that in our organizations, we have a clear mission, a clear vision of why we are doing this change to Agile, or why we're trying to get better in our processes and our practices, because we're trying to achieve something, because anytime we introduce a change, Agile or anything else, organizational or whatever, we're going to get worse first, and so we want to make sure everybody is bought in and aligned and willing to go through this journey that's going to be a pain in the butt, right? So we want to make sure we have alignment there. We also want to make sure you're thinking about this as an organizational transformation. This isn't just train people on a process. And so here's one model, Kotter's change model. And there's some key things down here at the bottom. Create a sense of urgency. Why do we want to make the change? That's what we were just talking about. Form a powerful coalition. This could be like a leadership team. Who's going to drive this change? Who's going to shape the vision? Who's going to respond to the organizational impediments with a sense of urgency, right? And communicate this vision. And then we want to start empowering action and get quick wins. And that might start off with, let's do a pilot with a small team and get success. That, how are we going to roll this out? And we want to have like internal marketing, internal PR of like, hey, this is going great, and help kind of spread the word around. So we've got to apply these organizational change models. The other thing that we do is, if you call it a transformation or a transition, we want to focus and run the transformation with Scrum, with Agile, right? It could be Kanban, it could be Scrum. But the idea is we need to build a backlog of what are all the things that we need to do. We need to prioritize that because we can't change everything overnight, just like anything else we do in Agile. And then we need this kind of leadership team or transition team who is working this backlog. And we might even form sub-teams as we say, okay, we got to go figure out DevOps. Okay, who are the people that are going to go figure out DevOps? Right? So we might need to form these groups, but we need to work things and make everything that we're doing visible. And so when a team escalates an issue, it goes onto a board. And the leadership team shows how they're prioritizing that, and they are responding and reacting to these changes and showing their commitment to the organization that they are going to resolve the issues. Because the worst thing to happen is we say, hey, team, you need to be agile. We're going to send you to training because you need to change. And then you start escalating issues that are organizational issues, and management doesn't do anything about it. So do you guys believe that I actually want us to be agile if I'm not going to make any changes myself? If I'm not going to practice agile myself? Picking up where we left off, we had just finished talking about the transition team and forming this around Align. And so this Align stage needs to be done before we introduce the change. What happens in most organizations is they say, we need training, they train everybody, and then everybody starts in that chaos and resistance, and we're not aligned. I was talking to somebody on the way down the stairs, and he said, how do I combat the resistance? Well, you combat the resistance by, is everybody bought into the goal? Right? I heard about a product management group that's resisting the change. Well, are they bought into the goal? Right? Are they bought into the mission of, like, we think Agile is going to help? And it doesn't sound like they are. And it doesn't sound like they are being held accountable to change by the leadership team around this mission. So nobody horizontally in the organization is going to be able to convince them that they should change if their boss says, yeah, don't change. Right? So we've got to get alignment at the top. So we see these pains over here. So a lot of times the symptoms are things like you've got a lot of chaos and resistance, you're implementing Agile or you're implementing safe, right? But you're not actually being Agile, and you don't have those missions. And the solutions are the things that we talked about, right? Sense of urgency, creating a transformation backlog, creating a team. So what I want you to do is on your sheet, under a line, it says your rating. What I want you to do is, how do you rate your organization's level of Align? 1 being low, 5 being like we are way aligned, we're all rowing in the same direction. So put a number there and text it in. All right, so this is kind of, well, it's a little higher than I would expect, right? That there's some alignment, and maybe that means there's some alignment within one part of the organization but not other parts of the organization. Right? Or we have no alignment, so I would expect lots of resistance over here in these organizations and very few over here that have alignment around this mission. So these are in a sequence, right? Like, we're going to work on a lot of this stuff at once, but you got to make sure you got Align right before you're going to be able to make a lot of progress at the others. So if you have a low rating, then I would encourage your organization to focus on what do we need to do to get better alignment. All right, so we did that. So pitfall number 2, team and leadership are not equipped with the knowledge. So in Agile, I forgot, we got a poll in here. All right, so what percentage of your team has been trained? Who in Agile, Scrum, Kanban, whatever you're implementing, what percentage of your team, if that's formal classroom training or we all read a book together, like they've done something to get aligned on the knowledge. book club, whatever it was. What do we have for that? So we've got 60 responses in, and we've got a few, we've got none, we've got maybe half, most, everyone. So that's, that over here, this would be really good, right? Like getting everyone, like we have changed, things change, but like everyone has gone through some amount of training. That's good, right? We definitely want to see that. And the reason for that is because as we're switching from Waterfall to Agile, we talk a lot in Agile about self-organizing teams, which means we're arming the team to solve their problems and to improve their process. But if our team isn't trained with the knowledge, how are they armed to solve their problems, right? With understanding what is the capability, what is this Agile thing? And if it's just the one person, like we sent you to Certified Scrum Master class, and you'll come back and you will tell everybody else what to do. That sounds very Agile. Right? No. Right? But if we say, all right, we want you guys all to own your process. You're going to be doing retrospectives. You're going to figure out how to improve. You're going to figure out how to get good at this stuff. Then you all need to be armed with the knowledge and talking the same language. So even if I had a team, I come into this organization, you did Agile at another company, you did an Agile at a previous company, you did Agile at a previous company, you did Agile at a previous company. Is all Agile the same? No. Like everyone in this room, you're probably learning a lot today from each other of different experiences that you have. And the reality is not all of your Agile is the same. And I've had companies where like, Scrum is garbage. And then you dig into it, and what they implemented as Scrum is like nothing like I would ever call Scrum. But that's what they know in their head is the definition of Scrum, because some Scrum Master went to certification class and taught that person, here's what Scrum is, and they hadn't done it yet. So are they an expert? Can they teach it? Right? No. And then whatever this team figured out. So we want to make sure everybody is armed, and the leadership needs to be armed because they've got to change how they lead. Right? They can't just be command and control. It's like I see this every organization. Yeah, you guys be Agile, but I want to know what's the date and what's going to be in it. Right? Like, so that's not going to work. So we want to make sure our leadership is understanding how their role changes and how their way of thinking about these problems change, and how we plan changes, how we prioritize changes. Right? We got to work on those things. Learning also doesn't just stop in a classroom. Right? Learning is like we get knowledge in a classroom. We learn by doing. Right? We learn by practice. So one model is the Shuhari model that says at first we've got to just do the rules. We just got to follow. We just got to do the same things over and over again. We need the repetition. Like think about if you have a kid, or when you tried to learn to ride a bike, like I got to figure out where my feet go on the pedals. I got to figure out how to steer. I got to figure out how to balance. I got to figure out all these things. And then I just got to keep kind of doing them, and then I get the muscle memory and I can get good at them. Right? The other part of a team. Ooh, that's really cool. Parameter must. Yeah, let's skip over. Yeah, it's going to freak out. Okay, so let's the one that's on the screwed up slide there is something you've heard, Tuckman's model, or forming, storming, norming, and performing. And every team that you build goes through these stages of forming and figuring out how to start working together, get connected with each other. Storming is where there starts getting some tension. We have to work through that to get to norming. Right? We've got to invest in that. That takes time. That's part of learning. That's part of forming these teams. And team maturity, like you start off, you just have a group of people who are cooperating with each other. Like I've got a task, you got a task, you got a task. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. We'll achieve the goal. That's not really what we mean by self-organizing teams, right? Self-organizing teams is we all have a team goal. We're all pulling for each other. We're all working together. We're swarming on problems. And that's part of team maturity. And that's something that needs to be learned, right? So when we look at this from a path to agility, during this chaos and resistance is when we're learning these new rules, right? We're in the shoe stage, right? We're in the forming and storming and trying to get to norming. Right? We're in the stage of, well, we form these set of people, but are we truly a self-organizing team? We've got to work through those things. And so as we look at stage 2, we see things like the pains are, we're not talking the same language of what Agile is. So we need some better knowledge. We need to align on terminology. We need to align that Scrum or Kanban or a mix or whatever is the right answer for us, right? Thinking that we're just doing Agile and it's a process change, right? Those things. And then if you look on the solution side, we need not only training and education, but we also need to provide slack to learn, right? Every time I go in an organization, they say, yeah, we need to implement Agile, but we can't go any slower. It's like, have you heard of the Satir model, right? Like your team is going to have to go through that. Now, how long they go through chaos and resistance, how long they go down, that's really the question. How quickly can we get through that? And the more support you give your team, the faster they will recover and start producing at a higher rate. But you got to go slow to go fast. And a lot of leaders aren't ready for that. And it's like, well, then you're not ready to change, right? Because we've got to go through those things in order to learn. So what I want you to do on your sheet is write down your rating of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on learn. And then once this loads up, go ahead and send your answer in. How are you doing on learn? How well is your team educated around the problem? How well have they given time to learn these new practices? It's organization-wide, so it's team and leadership, right? So it applies across both. All right, so we've got a little bit heavier on, we're balancing out here, so 2s and 3s, right? We've got some room for improvement. So in the bottom section, I want you to follow along. Either you're circling a potential solution or writing in what is something that you could do, you could implement in order for your organization to improve, get from 3 to 4, get from 2 to 3, right? Get from 1 to 2. Where do you think your organization is stuck, and what could they do to move forward? All right, so pitfall number 3, not getting to done. This is like the most important thing for organizations to focus on is what is our goal at the end of a sprint? We're supposed to have something at the end of the sprint. Anybody know what that is? Potentially shippable product, right? But that is really hard to achieve. However, it is the most important thing. If your team only focuses on one thing, focus them on trying to get potentially shippable, getting to done. So what I want you to do is tell me what percentage of your sprints get to 100% of the plan done. So when they go to sprint planning, they leave sprint planning with a goal, with a plan. We're going to deliver these set of stories, this functionality. How often do they deliver all of that scope to a potentially shippable product increment by the end of their sprint? If that's 2 weeks or whatever that is. There we go. Yeah, the fire is in the server room. So we've got, 5 teams out of 59 who are never 6. All right, somebody's being honest now. So 10% never make their goal. All right, we've got, but in 0 always. That's kind of scary, right? So the goal to me is that you should be getting 9 out of 10 of your sprints 100% done. Right, and that's okay. But Jared, that is a good point. Right, that's my Longhorn education, your Aggie education, right? No, don't call me. Hey, I like this Aggie, right? He doesn't like being called an Aggie. All right, cool. All right, so let's look at where sometimes this goes wrong. So a lot of times we focus on individual efficiency as opposed to effectiveness of our team. So let's say we have a 2-week sprint with 4 user stories, 4 developers, 2 QA. What's the most efficient way for me to assign this work out? Put 1 developer per story, right? So I have dev 1, dev 2, dev 3. You know what? And the developers in the room, I was a developer, so don't take offense. I'm talking about myself here. not you. But developers, tend to like to work on their own a lot of times. Like they don't really like people. So they would love nothing more than like, just put my headphones on, I don't have to interrupt, I don't have to coordinate, I can build it my way, I can write the code my way, and I can just go for 8 days and be focused. And don't interrupt me, I don't want any meetings, it's just for 8 days I'll go get my thing done, no interruptions. However, our goal is not about efficiency. I would argue that learning, from a bigger viewpoint, learning is more about our product, and validation is way more important than individual efficiency. And so when we do this and we have QA assigned out this way, what does this look like to you? What kind of plan? A waterfall plan. So we should not have Scrum turned into mini waterfalls, right? But this is very common. And so waterfall has a lot of risk inherent at the end of the cycle. So you, if you're working your sprint like this, have a lot of risk at the end, which means you have a lot of risk that things will carry over into the next sprint because you're only going to find the bugs in the last couple days and you're going to run out of time. Right? You're trying to integrate everything at the end. You're trying to test everything at the end. So how should we work? We want to do some new skills for our teams. We want to teach them how to break work down, how to break stories down, how to break tasks down. We want to teach them how to swarm, so multiple people are working on something together. We want cross-functional teams so we can get potentially shippable at the end of 2 weeks. And we want to make sure we're doing cross-training. We call that T-shaped people who have a depth of skill but also have a breadth of skill, so we have flexibility of people being able to help out. We have to invest in these things, these new skills. Your teams will suck at these skills at first, and they won't think it's possible. They'll say, we can't break it down. It doesn't fit in 2 weeks. It's bigger than that. I've been doing this a long time. I have yet to see the problem that can't be broken down into 2 weeks. There's something you're going to do differently today than tomorrow, than the next day, than the next day, and that's what sprint planning is for us to figure that out. Right? And if we do this, then we have something to review every couple days. We have a story to deliver that is potentially shippable every couple days. That's what our goal is. So that by the end of the sprint, we have only 2 parts of the story that actually will be at risk if we didn't get it all the way done, right? We want to work in this form, which means small stories, small tasks, multiple people working on things together, which is going to write higher quality code, better cross-training, more flexibility, lots of other good benefits. The other issue is that we start sprints without clarity. Right? We start a lot of sprints without understanding what it is that we're about to do. So at the end of a sprint, I know, some of the language has been softened in Scrum, like, we're creating a goal or we're creating a sprint commitment or whatever it is. But at the end of the sprint, we are creating a plan of here's what we think we're going to be able to get done. And if the team doesn't really understand the scope of work that they're committing to, right, do you really have confidence in that plan? No. And that means you're probably going to miss a lot of your sprints on your sprint goal. So we need to make sure that we're engaging in things like backlog grooming prior to the sprint with the whole team so they can spin up and get an understanding by the time they get into sprint planning. We want to make sure we're having conversations with the team. And you might even look at things like definition of ready, so everybody's on the same page of what do we need to have in place before we actually pull it into sprint planning. It needs to be small. It needs to have acceptance criteria. It needs to be sized. It needs to be, everybody on the team has had a conversation and asked questions about it. Right? We don't have any outside dependencies that would block us from being able to get it done. We have everybody that we need in order to get it done. Right? Those could be things in your definition of ready that says we, as a group, including product owner, need to get the stories to this state in order for us to pull it into our sprint. Because if we don't, then we've got a lot of risk in our sprint. We're going to have a lot of surprises in our sprint. We're not going to be potentially shippable very frequently. So predict is all about getting good at, if you're implementing Scrum. How many people in the room are implementing Scrum or using Scrum? Right? Okay, so I'll keep using that example. Right? So if we're implementing Scrum at the end of the a 2-week sprint, we need to get predictable. We need to know our velocity. We need to be done in the majority of our sprints. Right? That's what our goal is. That's what our focus is. And we need to change everything else in our process to get and accomplish that goal. That's our number one goal. Because I believe that you cannot go faster until you get predictable. If I have a team that's not predictable and I ask them to go faster, they're all over the place. Like, how do we know that what they tried in the retrospective actually helped if they're not predictable? So teams have to get predictable, and then as we try things, we will see the improvement. So we need to focus on getting predictable before we go faster, even though most of the time, and you guys voted on this, your number one goal of why you wanted to go Agile was to get faster. That's great, but as you see on your sheet, predict is before accelerate. We got to figure out how to get predictable before we can go faster. So we see pains. You highlighted it. You have a lot of carryover into the next sprint. Maybe Dev and QA it's still like throw it over the wall, over to QA. They throw it back. They're blaming them, right? You don't know your velocity, right? If you don't know your velocity, are you predictable? No, I mean, if you're doing Kanban and you have cycle time and throughput and other measures, like there's other ways to measure besides velocity, but like if you don't have the measures, then you don't have predictability. So what we're looking at in terms of solutions, first you got to make all your work visible, right? You got to be able to see the problem. You got to be able to see the bottleneck in order to attack it. You've got to limit your work in process until you can get to done. If I have a team that plans 20 and gets 10 done, and then plans 20 and gets 10 done, what's their velocity? 10. How much should they plan next sprint? 10. And they're like, but we can do 20. And you're like, no, you can't. Right? And they're like, do 10, make it, get a win, and then figure out how to do 12. And then make it and get a win and figure out how to do 14. But you can't do 20. But it's not efficient. That's not our goal. Our goal is not efficiency. Our goal is to actually deliver value. Right? And if we're not delivering value, it doesn't matter how efficient we are. So what I want you to do is rate how well you're doing in your organization or rate your organization's level of predict. So write that down on your sheet, send that into the poll. All right, so, not so good. Oh, there's a late race for 3. All right, but we definitely are 50% at the lower end of the spectrum, right? This is where we start seeing the challenges because most organizations agree we all need training, so let's go learn, but then we don't actually do the things that we need to get good at it because we're not giving our teams slack and we're not actually attacking the problems. We're not holding our teams accountable to get done. We're not making the organizational change to create cross-functional teams in order to get done. Right? And so we start seeing these issues, and that's why we have a lower level of predictability in our organizations. All right, so quick discussion at your table. What needs to happen in your organization, or as you've seen, to be able to get to 9 out of 10 sprints or 100% done? So talk about that at your table. Take 2 minutes for that. Again, follow along. We're gonna be collecting some of these answers at the end, so follow along right in your sheet. If there's something that you came up with or your table came up with that you think would help improve predict, how do you get from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4? How do you move along that path and that journey? Now the next thing I want to know is something. We'll see how this works. Here we go. All right. So think about when an idea comes in to your company for a new feature. And how long does it take from the point that, idea is created, somebody looks at it, it gets, goes through kind of ideation, it gets to something that's prioritized, we decide that we're going to plan it, so somebody does some requirements definition, it gets into a team's backlog, the backlog gets prioritized, they finally pull it into their sprint, they finish it in their sprint, they get it into testing and through regression and through user acceptance and to production, it's actually into the field. How long does it take from idea all the way to it's in production?
Can you clarify, we're talking about something that is a $500,000
a feature. Just a feature which might be in a big BRD, right? It might be hiding in there, and that's part of the batch that holds it up. But how long does a feature take? I'm not saying one that's escalated and on a fast track. I'm just saying a normal, high priority feature. You don't have very many of those in your organization, right? High priority? All right. Yeah, they're all high priority, right? So how many are you able to send answers?
No, you have to open it.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. Like, is it rejecting you?
Your presenter, David Hawks.
How long? What an asshole.
There you go.
Okay, here we go. All right. So we got about 30 results, 40 results, 50 results. All right, so we've got 20% that are longer than a year. We've got more than half that are longer than 6 months. We've got some mixture in here, 1 to 6 months, right? It takes a really long time. Think about this from a business stakeholder perspective. They just came up with something that they think would be a really good idea to build that would help them save a lot of money, help you drive a lot of revenue, whatever that thing is. And they have the daunting task of trying to get it into that process. And who do they think in the organization is the bottleneck? Us, right? Like if those IT people would just, like they come in flip-flops and beards and all this, and they're like, it takes a year to get anything done, right? So let's talk about this problem, right? The problem here is once we get predictable. So our team now in a sprint can break work down. They're getting to done. That's just a small part of the problem. Like when you thought about this 1 year time frame and you had a sprint that was 2 weeks. And what is your organization trying to optimize? And who are they telling to go faster? These people, right? They're saying, like, the developers, they just need to code faster. Right? If they just would code faster, we could get this. No, that's not the bottleneck anymore. Like, we fix that bottleneck, and once we start getting established velocity, then we can build trust in the organization that they can start looking at other parts of the organization. But if you don't focus on predict first, they're going to blame you. But that's why we say predict happens before accelerate, because if you focus on predict first, you can start exposing that the problems are somewhere else, right? And part of the problems were where you were, but now they're not anymore. So when we look at the whole value stream, from the point that an idea comes in to the point that we actually, I just said deploy. What I really want to know is at what point is it validated in the market? The reason why I didn't have that in the first question is for most of y'all that would be infinity. You don't get market validation. You just ship and then go on to the next release. We don't actually know, did the features that we implemented make the impact that we thought they would. So when we look at this spectrum, one of the things that we apply to help to go faster are things like Scrum. But Scrum just focuses on a small part of this, mostly on implementation, right, with testing of the feature. But if we're doing things right, we're focused on prioritization all the way through getting that feature ready to release, potentially shippable. But we also have things like test automation and continuous integration, which people all forgot about for a little while, right? And it's like, let's just implement Scrum, but we need to get test automation. Oh, that's going to take forever. Yeah, that's an investment. Right? And you don't have it, and you need to invest so you have continuous integration, and that's what's going to optimize from getting implementation all the way through it's ready for deployment. And then there might have been a couple talks. There might be some new buzzworthy kind of word called DevOps, right? Which is focused a little bit further downstream, but starts at implementation. And now is saying we need to build upon this test automation and continuous integration and get to continuous delivery and focus on automated deployment and make this part of the process go faster. I had an organization I was working with. They were focused on the teams getting faster. You know how long it took to deploy their product? 12 weeks. Is there a problem that they need the team to go faster? Right? I mean, it was a 1 year requirements prioritization process. a 3-month dev cycle of sprints, and then 12 weeks to deploy. Right? The bottleneck wasn't development in that process. And then we look at things like lean product discovery that say, how fast can we get from ideation to market validation? And maybe we're going to skip some of these steps in between and run smaller experiments, or we're going to do a sliver of some functionality, but it's not going to be the full feature. Right? Things like lean startup, using tools like user story mapping, if you haven't read Jeff Patton's book. But what can we do to figure out, are we building the right product as opposed to just focused on building the product faster? Right, so we need to look at optimizing all of this. Is this what the Scrum team is going to be focused on? No, who needs to get engaged now? Leadership. So if any of you went to the talk, I didn't go to the talk, but I saw the title of like, what's the role of a manager? Here's my slide for what's the role of a manager. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that Scrum team anymore. They got that part. You don't need a taskmaster anymore. You don't need to tell people what to do. You don't need to monitor what their progress is. The team's got that. Scrum Master, product owner, the team, they'll figure that out. You need to be focused on the full value stream. That's your job as a manager. That's your job as a leader in the organization, is to optimize the whole, all the way across here. And those are hard problems. Those aren't going to change very easily, but these are the issues that your team is going to start escalating up to leadership. Leadership needs to be ready and armed to go do something about it. So for sake of fire alarm time, think in your head about what is the main bottleneck in your full value stream. Maybe jot that down. Where do you think that is? But we're not going to discuss it right now. So what we're talking about now is accelerate, right? So we got through the integration and practice of the Satir model by getting through predict, by getting good at Scrum, by getting good at these practices. Now we're trying to get faster and shortening cycle time. And when we look at cycle time, we got to look at the full value stream, not just how long does it take a development team to get a feature from the time it got into their ready queue to the time that it left their queue. Right? And the talk that William's going to be doing next, he's going to be talking about portfolio level Kanban and looking at, how do we kind of look at things across this full value stream. So when we look at accelerate, the pains that you're seeing, long release cycle times, a lot of times that's the number one goal. Right? People say we need to go shorten cycle times. Our time to market is too long. It takes for a year. But the main thing I want to leave you with, right, I'm not done. That sounded like we're about to, like happy hours happening, Jared. The main thing I want to convey in this talk is that you can't just start with going faster. You got to focus with, are we aligned around a problem so we can start reducing the resistance? Are we investing in the learning and the slack to learn? Is it a safe to fail environment, safe to learn environment? Are we focused on getting good at the core practices around and allowing us to predict so that we can now start to go faster? We have to invest in those things first. So what I want you to do is, I think I somehow got tricked up on my little visualization of my polls. Well, there it goes. I didn't even do anything. All right, so what's your level of accelerate? As your organization, where do you put yourself? 5 being we're great, our cycle time is so awesome, like we have optimized our full value stream, there is no room for improvement. 1 being, I don't even know why I'm at this conference. I mean, it takes 2 years to get an idea done, so actually I'm at this conference because they won't miss me, right? All right, so yeah, as I was expecting, we're kind of in that 2-3 range. We've got some, 20, almost 20% down here in the ones, right? And we've got some teams that are moving fast, which I expect if I go and look at those organizations, maybe they're a fairly newer cloud SaaS continuous delivery environment, right? And they invested in those things from the beginning. Like my saddest moments around town, or is when I go meet somebody and they're like at this 1-year-old startup, and they haven't done any test automation or any continuous integration or any continuous delivery, and they're building a cloud SaaS product. And I'm like, shame on you. I mean, most of you in the room, I understand, you have a legacy product. It's 10 years old. It wasn't really cloud when it started, and now it is, or it's like it's ASP something or other, right? Like okay, we have a big investment to make, but folks that started out in the cloud SaaS world in the last 5 years, like, there's no excuse for you not to invest in having the infrastructure that's going to allow you to go fast, right? Because your market is going to demand that. So pitfall number 5, and then we'll be out of here, is that thinking Agile is just helpful for tech, right? And so in the keynote this morning, there's multiple people that asked, like, can we apply this stuff outside of Agile? And it's like, hell yes. But we've got to prove to the organization that we can do it well inside of our own part of the organization before we can start really, evangelizing it across the organization. So we know the world has changed, right? The way that we would manage this factory floor is not how we should manage today. However, many organizations are still being managed in this kind of command and control hierarchy-driven way. And that's not just in the technology group. This applies across the organization because we have a different workforce. We don't have a workforce in most of the U.S. companies and most of your companies that are just semi-skilled workforce, that just standards and repeatable actions is what we need to manage. It's about creativity, and we're dealing with knowledge workers. And we have a problem. There's a stat that says only 1 out of 5 knowledge workers are fully engaged in their work. That means out of 5 people, only 1 of you have decided to bring your brain to work today. Like, I want to know who that person is because I'd like to direct my attention to them right now. Right? And a lot of times it's the manager, and they haven't empowered their team. They're not giving the team autonomy, and they're taking all the control, and the team is checked out, and their team's like, you know what, they pay me the same, and I don't have to think. Right? Now, many of us in this room, if we were in an organization where we weren't allowed to think, we would say, bye-bye, I'm going to go somewhere else because I want to have the autonomy to do that. And so we see things around knowledge work. So I found this bug in this polling software that I use. I have to explain this thing real quick. So anytime I have a link in my presenter's notes, it tries to run it. And what I realize is that somehow I got an old copy back when something happened. So I've got something that still has a link. Okay, so when we see, some of you have read the book Drive by Dan Pink, or at least you've seen the video of RSA Animate video. If you haven't seen the RSA Animate video, search for Dan Pink Drive. Watch this video immediately, send it around to your leadership team. And what it says is money is not a motivator for knowledge workers. Money can be a demotivator if we're not paid enough. But once we're paid enough, say that's $100,000, I'm not going to choose a job between this one pays me $100,000, this one pays me $105 because I'm getting paid enough. What I'm going to choose is I'm going to choose the job where I have a sense of purpose, mastery, and autonomy. These are things that we need to focus on. And these principles that we see in Agile around self-organizing teams, around focused on improving our craft, on focusing on having a vision, clear priorities, clarity, these aren't just things that apply to our software organization. These apply to everywhere in your organization that has knowledge workers. And what we see is that our leaders are emerging out of Agile organizations, are leaders of our future, not just the leaders of the technology group. So you guys are all being armed to become the next wave of leaders in every organization, in all aspects of those organizations, because you know how to work with a team of knowledge workers and how to get them to be highly effective. So what we see when we get to adapt is that we want to focus on taking our champions out of our technology groups and having them spread that across the organization. And what happens is we start seeing some organic kind of virus spreading, right? We're like, man, that's really cool what you guys are doing. Can we do that over here in marketing? Yeah, you can make a visual board, right? You can start getting visualization of the problem. You can start having a daily huddle so everybody's synced up. You can figure out how to swarm on problems. Like, holy crap. like somehow, what did I say about a virus? Like that's being spread throughout here. So when we get to adapt, we're saying the teams are doing great, but now we can focus on the organization as a whole, and we can start working with those organizations to help them truly work with organizational agility. Because what you guys, I get this question all the time, like we're doing Agile, but we're in a waterfall world. Right? What that means is you figured out Agile down here, but the organization is still running in a waterfall world, and that's common. That's part of the journey. We've got to figure out how to be Agile here. Now we got to spread it to the other parts of the organization, and we've got to start finding groups and pockets of folks that are interested in this, and this stuff can be applied at executive level. This can be applied in HR, marketing, any operations. We've applied in every part of an organization so that the organization can start responding with agility to market demands and empowering their workforce. So, last rating of adapt. How do you think you guys are doing in adapt? How well is your organization at being adaptable? How well is your organization responding with agility? Okay, so to wrap up, you've got this sheet, you've been following along. I want you to think about what's the top thing that you could go and implement that you've written down on your sheet. I want you to circle that. Because can we go change 5 things tomorrow? No, we can go change one thing. So here's what I want you, final poll. This is going to be a little cool. This is a word cloud. So I want you to write what is one word that describes your top pain. Everybody's just typing that like, I don't know what that is. But those that are voting in Jex, can you explain? Or you're just having fun? It's okay if you're having fun.
It's a priority that comes out of nowhere, or it seems like a priority.
Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. So like interruptions. Awesome. Yep. It's higher priority. Our pants are on fire again. All right. Okay, cool. So we've got about 50, or about our 60 answers in. Awesome. So injects alignment leadership. All right, we've got some training. We've got resistance over here, ignorance. All right, so last poll, and then we'll be out of here. What's one word that describes the top solution that you discovered today that you think you could go implement or help your organization? You might not be able to implement it on your own, but what do you think is the top solution your organization should implement? Beer. I like that one.
Well.
So we've got alignment, training, education, leadership. We could implement leadership. Like if we just had some damn leaders around here. Right? Yeah. All right. You got to implement hawks. Right? Yeah. I didn't know I was implementable. Yeah. All right.
Only by your parents.
Cool. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know when I'll be potentially shippable. All right. So you've got that. If you haven't stopped by our booth, you only have like 20 minutes left to do that. David Hawks, thanks a lot. Sorry about the fire drill, but we got through what we got through.